What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., our buddy Emerson Latzia back holding it down for us in the DraftKings studio in Boston here. We got a great show for you guys today. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us. Leave us a 5-star rating and check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on DraftKingsNetwork.com, our YouTube channel, Samsung TV Plus, Roku, and catch the best of on VSiN from noon to 1 p.m. Eastern each and every day. Fun one guest-wise today, our buddy Jessica Smetana is going to stop by and help us break down these damn baseball pants and maybe a little of what's gone on with Notre Dame over the last 48 hours. And Arizona State head football coach Kenny Dillingham going to join us here. Kenny's comments, I think, brought some people on notice the other day talking about the current state of NIL and college football, the coaches that have been departing for the NFL and other levels. And I'm fascinated, Dad, as I'm sure you are, to get a current college football head coach at a Power 5 schools vantage point on all of the changes in the sport. Kenny's one of the young guys. He's 33 years old. He's at the helm of his alma mater at Arizona State, and I think is a really unique vantage point as one of the guys just now getting into his head coaching tenure in college football and how all of this has affected his experience even so far.
Yeah, I look forward to talking to him, as you mentioned, a young coach, and everybody talking, especially coaches, about how hard it is to coach in college. And it certainly has changed. The landscape has changed. And in my opinion, what Kenny Dillingham said was very refreshing. And, you'll hear him say it as well. It's just, this is a job a lot of people want, not to say the landscape didn't change, but I'm doing something that a lot of people want to do, and he enjoys doing it. So we look forward definitely to talking to him. Quickly, for those of you on the bingo card with Jessie Cofield, who was part of this show and is off now on her as she's getting ready to give birth to her second child. Still at this point, we have no news of her giving birth to that child. So for those who are trying to guess the date, she's due February 29th, still nothing. So we get a non-pregnant Emerson Latzia in
I do have a food
studio.
baby.
Well, there you go.
Right,
there you go. Knew you had that. Had that. So that, like you said, couple good guests, lot to talk about. NBA was back in action though, so we got some interesting games and could set up some interesting scenarios down the road.
Yeah, JJ Redick, thank you for your services during the dead period after the All-Star game. You can now rest easy because the Hoopers are back. And we had a bunch of action last night, Dad, but the nightcap, and one that I think a lot of people were interested in, mostly for nostalgia at this point, I think more so than reality. Warriors and Lakers played. The Warriors get a 128-110 win in a game that, Dad, seems like a preview for the play-in round. And this has worked out incredibly well for the NBA ever since they instituted the play-in tournament for the postseason, where you've gotten a couple marquee matchups, you've gotten these teams with great names and star power on them, and seem pretty evenly matched until Golden State makes the run, Dad. Like, both of these teams, I think, are absolutely capable of beating the other. The problem seems to be in what the Lakers ran into last night, on a night where Steph Curry had 32 points and looked like he was cooking, especially from beyond the arc early, is the Lakers lose the math problem. They've gone all in on a style that, as we know in the modern NBA, is a little bit outdated, and the Warriors, capable of making runs like they did last night, combined with that little surge of youth they've had injected into the lineup this year, seems like it might be too much for them, but I think still is the play-in everyone's rooting for.
Oh, without a doubt. Remember, LeBron did not play last night, still nursing that ankle. I think he's supposed to play tonight. They've played twice this year. We had that great double overtime game a while back, 145-144. Lakers won, and as Mike said, Golden State wins it last night pretty easily, 128-110. They play two more times. They play March 16th and then April 9th. And as Mike said, with the new play-in, and for those that are unfamiliar with it, the top 6 in each conference are automatically in. 7, 8, 9, and 10 are playing for the last 2 slots. And the way it works, 7 and 8 play one another. The winner is the 7 seed, and the loser plays the winner of the 9-10 game. If you're 9 and 10, you actually have to win twice to become the 8th seed. And right now, the Lakers and the Warriors are the 9-10 seed. So they would play, if the season ended today, they would play. Winner would still have to win one more game to make the playoffs, but loser would be out. So it'd be that elimination game for the loser. And yeah, listen, we all hope for that. In a sport of series, baseball does the same thing, not going into the playoffs, but if you're tied at the end of the year, you have that one game. You're just not used to that in series sports, right? When you're playing one game to continue on. And that's what goes on. We know with the tie in baseball and now with the playing in basketball, that's what can happen. It's one and done. If you lose that 9-10 game, you're done for the year. So we're all looking forward to that. We still have, like I said, 25 or so games to go to see where that all can end up, to see, where they are. Because as we said, right now they're 9 and 10. They're 3 games back from Sacramento, sitting in the 8th slot. So we'll see. Time will tell. But yeah, I think we'd all like to see that down the road, as that one game kind of elimination thing.
Well, and you're right, Dad, the single game elimination certainly does to add a different layer to this sport than we've seen, and it makes it somewhat exciting. There is that excitement around it in Major League Baseball season when we'd seen it. So I understand all that. And with these two teams in particular, you're right. LeBron James not being on the floor last night, huge factor in all that. But trying to spin it ahead, Dad, because as we've mentioned, we can have this conversation because it seems like there's a clear upper crust in the West where there's a bunch of teams bottled up between like 1 and 4. But then after that, a pretty sizable gap that I don't know if is going to be made up in the final 28 to 30 games. And so it kind of seems like this will be as is, and it makes me wonder, Dad, which of these teams would actually be more capable of potentially pulling one of those early round upsets once you get out of the play-in tournament? Like if you are Minnesota, if you are Oklahoma City, who are both rolling right now, OKC looked great last night against the Clippers. Which of these teams scares you more between Golden State and the Lakers? Because I'm inclined to say at this point, it's Golden State. Like with the way Steph Curry is playing, combined with Jonathan Kuminga, Podziemski, and what he's done as a rookie this year, they just seem to have enough dudes that have been a shot of life into the arm of a Golden State team that, listen, is still going to have to deal with the fact that you're only going to get Klay Thompson like every other night, it feels like. Had a real off shooting night again last night after before the All-Star game, that 35-point barrage off the bench. It still feels like the Warriors, again, because of the style of basketball they play where you can go on these runs and bury you from beyond the arc, probably have the best chance of being the upset bid.
Oh, I don't think there's any doubt. The style that they play, they're never out of a game. And even Steph Curry said after the game last night, he said, not sure what kind of a run we can go on, but we can beat anybody at any time. He said we can be that tough out for a team. And I agree. If you're one of the upper teams and you're looking down at the bottom of the conference that's going to get in, I would, without question, fear Golden State more than the Lakers. And I get the Lakers are like the Cowboys, are like the Yankees, are like Notre Dame. Everybody talks about it. Everybody wants to talk about them. But in this day and age of the NBA, Golden State, it's kind of like Kansas City, you say Pat. Golden State, you say Steph. You're in the game. You're in the game because you have Steph Curry. I mean, bottom line, Klay Thompson's not even that guy at the end anymore, and he can still come in and dagger you at times as well. So, yeah, their style definitely bodes better for them. Shocking somebody. And again, if they're in that 9-10 and then win again, they would be the 8th seed. Now you're playing the top. That scare would be for the top seed in the conference, right? Wouldn't that be something to be a tough out for the number 1 seed if, in fact, they were the 8th seed?
Well, and yeah, I mean, talking to Amin Elhassan the other day, it's like, yeah, there is a premium for experience in the postseason. If you are this Minnesota Timberwolves team that, hey, you completed a great turnaround after a rough first year with Rudy Gobert at the helm, and you look great, he's going to win Defensive Player of the Year, it all feels good, and then you get this boogeyman that waltzes out of the play-in tournament. Be terrifying for everyone. And there was part of me, Dad, last night that as we got basketball back and a lot of teams were in action, and we'll talk about a couple of the other MVP candidates that were out going to work last night.
Yep.
I kind of got a little sad last night because you're going around in these games and you're seeing Steph Curry as this elder statesman who's at the helm of a team full of young guys that are coming alive. His running mates around him and Klay Thompson. I mean, Draymond's wearing all the gray in his beard. You hear, hey, Steph's in his 15th year. And he seems like he's a guy that's kind of understanding, hey, like you said, we're not capable of what we used to be right now. And so he's navigating through that change. There's going to be even more change coming for him this offseason. Kevin Durant being 35, LeBron James sitting on the bench looking as old as he has. It's very like, I don't know, it was sobering to see and really realize for a second, oh man, the guys that have been the center of the basketball universe for the last decade plus are really close to the end. Like, we're so close to a league that doesn't involve all of these guys. And as we talk about the next stars and next man up, man, it's some big shoes to fill personality-wise, what these guys have meant to the game and what they've done as champions.
Sobering is the correct word, that you move on. Listen, this happens in every sport. You know, when you move on from certain players in the NFL, it's normally a quarterback, a group of quarterbacks you move on from. Here, I mean, you're seeing in this era, and it's a long era because of how much LeBron and Steph have played, you're seeing, without question, I don't think there's any debate at all when you finish this, the greatest shooter in NBA history. There's a debate on those of LeBron James on where he is as far as greatest player of all time, but he's in the top team picture. So you're saying one of the greatest, in some people's minds, the greatest player of all time, the greatest shooter of all time. And oh, by the way, yeah, Kevin Durant, the 7-foot freak that we all looked at as this skinny kid coming out of Texas who couldn't bench 185 pounds one time at their combine, just be this unbelievable star in the NBA. So you're right. You're always looking for then the next. But these guys have done it over such a long period of time. You know, it was kind of like in golf. Who's the next Tiger Woods? And it was like, well, nobody at this point, you know, has grabbed that mantle. So you know, at this point, we can sit there and we threw out names the other day of who could be the face, but you got to do it for a while, right? We're talking about 23, 24, 25-year-olds as the new face of the league. You know, well, as you mentioned, Steph, 15 years, LeBron, 20 years, Durant, you know, obviously in double-digit years as well. So it's tough to replace. You just kind of go on. I think the game is in good, don't get me wrong, I think the game is in good hands with some of the young stars that are in the NBA. But what we've had to watch and deal with for the last 2 decades has been incredible, and it's going to take time to talk about, you know, the younger players now. It's going to take us time to talk about them in that vein, if at all.
Well, yeah, because part of that's going to be, hey, like, I understand, I don't want to turn this into, hey, it's just rings plus minus and it's however many championships you can hold up. But having exposure to these guys on the big stage for a long time did matter in building the lore. Like, we watched the Golden State Warriors go up against the LeBron James Cavs in the NBA Finals for 4 straight years. And I understand some people got sick of it by the end, but think about if you're the NBA building stars and building your product and getting it that good for so long, where you've got the 73-win Warriors, you've got the 3-1 comeback LeBron James, you've got so many of these things that are just incredibly box office great narrative things that build the lore around these players that have then also followed that up with incredible longevity where they get these multiple chapters to their career. So it puts a lot of pressure on the guys that are up next right now as we talk about something like the MVP race, Emerson, because we saw a couple of other games last night. We mentioned Oklahoma City and what Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's been doing. And then there was Luka Doncic and the Mavs giving the Suns a little bit of chin music last night as Luka continues to be on a scoring tear this season, leading the league in points per game for the first time in his career, and Emerson trying to put his closing argument in an MVP race.
Yeah, for sure. There's tons of young talent. If you guys want to get into that, on the MVP board right now on DK Sportsbook. So you have Nikola Jokic. He just posted another triple-double last night in Washington. He's got one now against every team he's played against in his 9-year career, looking for his third MVP in 4 years, in the driver's seat at minus 140. So he's 29. SGA at plus 220 for crying out loud. What is he, 24? Luka's around like 25 here. So yeah, the league is in good hands when you look at the stars who are emerging, who have been around for seasons already. Who is atop your MVP board right now, Gojo?
Yeah, I mean, you probably got to defer to the current MVP and Nikola Jokic and what he's been able to do. Even though the Nuggets haven't been as dominant in the regular season as we've seen in years past, I think part of that is, hey, they understand and recognize now after going through that deep postseason run to win a title, we kind of know when we need to throttle up on this thing. The bench players have been a little bit different this year. But, Dad, I think of the guys that are left on this, I'd love to see Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and OKC continue to get a lot of shine. Yeah. I think that's an incredible story overall. But Luka is just so individually compelling on this team. And now that they've weaponized Kyrie Irving without him saying some sort of weird, controversial conspiracy theory stuff, this is a team that's really interesting. And you saw, I think, them against the Suns last night, Dad, was kind of a perfect encapsulation of what might hurt the Suns down the stretches. Between Luka and Kyrie, you've got two very clear ball handlers that can be distributors, decision makers, create for themselves off the dribble. You've got someone in that point guard role, and it still feels like Phoenix at times is asking guys to work a little bit outside themselves, with Devin Booker being the primary ball handler, with Kevin Durant bringing the ball up on certain occasions. And you saw it. It gave Luka plenty of opportunity to shine in a game where it just seemed like he couldn't miss.
Yeah, but I wonder at this point, and that's what the beauty of the last 20-some games I think is going to be. I don't know if there's a clear, the like, oh yeah, it's this guy's to lose. Obviously what Jokic has done and being the MVP, you probably look at him as the returning guy. But you just mentioned three names: SGA, Doncic, and Jokic, right? So right now, SGA has his team in the second spot in the Western Conference. Jokic is fourth, and the Mavericks are sixth. So I do think, remember, this is a regular season award. Mm-hmm. Who leads their team to the best finish? I think that's going to be important. If SGA holds off those other two teams and keeps his team at 2 or maybe 1, or only 1 game behind Minnesota, I think that's a legitimate thought of, hey, he held off 2, known superstars to keep his team above them. I think that's going to have a lot to do with it, because right now you can throw out stats of both Luka number 1, SGA number 2 in scoring. Obviously Jokic he's out of the top 10. He's 13th, but look at everything else he does. It's absolutely ridiculous what he did. Again, he had another triple-double last night. Let's not lose a headline here. He did it. He had 21 points, 19 rebounds, 15 assists. He did it going 10 for 10. He's the first ever to have a triple-double shooting 100% from the field. I mean, that's an amazing thing that he's done. And he's now had a triple-double against every team in the NBA, where Russell Westbrook and LeBron James have it against actually every team, because Nikola Jokic has only been on Denver, so he hasn't had one against Denver. Russell and LeBron have had it against their former teams. Throw in there and give love to Maurice Stokes, who played from 55 to 58 for the Cincinnati Royals and Rochester Royals. He's another player that had done that as well. So, I mean, let's give some love to the, some of the former players in here as well.
Are you going to tell your Maurice Stokes story? You were all fired
Maurice
up coming into the pre-show meeting when you found out this information, deep diving on Maurice Stokes.
It's sad, but very interesting. Maurice Stokes played for 3 years, and I think it was his second last game. He was playing, and he hit the deck and hit his head on the floor and was knocked out. They brought him back. They got him conscious again. He played the rest of that game, played the next game, and then he had a seizure after that game. Very unfortunate, they believe, because of the fall 2 games ago, and he was completely paralyzed. And Jack Twyman, one of his teammates, actually became his legal guardian and took care of him. And for the next 12 years, unfortunately, Maurice passed away 12 years after that happened, and Twyman was his legal guardian, took care of him, his teammate. In June of 2013, the NBA actually announced the Twyman Stokes Teammate of the Year Award, which recognizes the player that embodies the league's ideal teammate that season. So Stokes' name is in there with LeBron and Russell Westbrook and with Nikola Jokic, but what a very, very sad ending to his career, but what an incredible pair between Twyman and Stokes having that bond. And now, that award that started in 2013 for them. I love reading back on some of the players back in the day on their, their careers and what had gone on with them.
No, it's incredible, and had absolutely no idea myself. So that's an interesting cap to a wild night in the association. Coming up next, though, the EA Sports college football video game making some interesting waves as it announced its pay scale for the players involved. Next.
First time in more than a decade here, EA Sports will be releasing a college football video game. A lot of fans celebrating the arrival of EA Sports College Football 25 this summer. No group, well, I don't know, depending on who you ask, is rejoicing more than the NCAA players here. So they're going to receive $600 for their name, image, and likeness. Plus, guys, they're going to get a free copy of the game, around $70. So all 134 FBS schools have agreed to take part in the game. After your Irish said, we are in, we will participate. Chris Ballard and Kirk Herbstreit will be the announcers on this thing. We pretty stoked. $600 enough to convince you to do it, GoJo?
Yeah, so this has become the interesting debate because, Emerson, you mentioned the schools all said that they're in on the action here, but the players actually have the ability to opt in or out. They've got a choice to make in here, they're going to use one of the NIL platforms that's become popular. I forget which one it is, but they have until a certain date, I believe in April, to go and actually opt into the game or not. And EA has committed to taking the top 85 players from each team. For anyone unaware, you have 85 scholarship players on a given college football roster. And so 85 over 133 teams, or about 133 teams, you're talking about roughly 11,000 players that have this decision to make. It $600 a piece. And Dad, I was very interested because yesterday a lot of people started up the debate online of, is this enough? We had this game go away back in 2014 because of a lawsuit that alleged that, hey, the athletes not being compensated for their name, image, and likeness was a problem. We're now at a point in time where name, image, and likeness is something athletes can profit off of, and everyone looking here and making a comparison to what goes on in the NFL for the NFL players and their Madden checks and what they get for that, which is in the area of about $20,000. Is $600 enough, Dad? How did you view this as someone who certainly was never involved in being in Madden or anything like that, but has seen the way that this has evolved over time?
Yeah, they didn't put, in my era, they didn't put us in any Pong games, or things like that. That was
$600 back in your day is like $5,000 today.
That would have been, we never would have got it. We'd have got $50 is what we would have got. I guess my thought is, Mike, would I like to see the players get more? Yes, but what's their avenue out of that? Unless you got together, you mentioned 11,000 players, get all the top players from each team to say they're opting out so you don't have it. Will that have an effect on the amount? I mean, that's the thing. I mean, you don't have any kind of organization amongst players to push back on something like this. And many of the players, quite honestly, they'll love $600, right? Listen, we sit there and talk about NIL. When we talk about players getting NIL money, it ain't everybody. Everybody's not getting NIL unless there are deals out there that include whole teams. I think, what was it, Utah, where every scholarship athlete got the use of a car, or in some places, hey, the whole O-line gets something. But not every player gets NIL. We read about the stars who are making all this money, but for every star, there's 10 to 15 players that aren't making a thing, or very, very small amount. So I don't think you're going to get a lot of pushback, and that's what you would need if you wanted to change that. But there's not a players' union for college players to say, hey, guys, whoa, don't opt in. Let's talk about this. If we all band together and say no, if all 11,000 plus of you say no to this game, they got to give us more money. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen.
No, I think you're right, Dad, for all those reasons. And it's one of those spots where I look at this and I look at the current state of college athletics and all the things going on for players and everyone else and go, not every fight has to be the fight. And I don't know if this is the hill that I would like to die on if I was a player, because you mentioned the NFL, you've got probably 1/6 the amount of players in that league. And, anywhere, especially accounting for practice squad guys, like 2,500 guys, between 22 and 2,500 guys a year on those teams that have a long history of having a union. And even for them, it's difficult to get on the same page all the time on a lot of issues and get things done. What you'd be talking about here is a coordinated effort amongst a much broader landscape of college athletes in far more varying financial situations, levels of the sport, that would come together really for the first time in order to fight the power on what would probably amount to mid four figures at best as a payout for everybody involved, all while you're trying to go to class, navigate the new NIL landscape, figure out how to become a young man and a college football player at the same time. We're asking too much of them, and the adults in the room that are trying to help on the outside, I appreciate the effort, but this just doesn't seem like the spot with everything else that's at stake where I'd be having to push back a ton. And then you look at the math of the situation, Dad, and you go, all right, the first NCAA game is going to sell like hotcakes because they haven't had it in a while, but traditionally, it never sold as many copies as Madden. You've got more players to spread that pool around to, and like you said, they've got no union, so while on principle, EA was going to have to pay him something because we've had too many headlines about this, it was only going to be so much because they've got no group that they're really having to negotiate seriously with in this prospect that's got any kind of real leverage in the situation the way the NFLPA does.
And you made the point. Even though I had the NFLPA and we had negotiating rights, it's still, everybody wasn't on the same page. You're absolutely right. I mean, we still had the in our sport, again, compared to the rest of the country, it's a lot of money, but you had the haves and the have-nots that we as a union couldn't agree on things. Some of the guys making more money wanted things that we negotiated that benefited them, while the greater percentage of foot soldiers like myself were like, wait a minute, that's not benefiting us. We wanted to try to find that middle ground. That's for professional athletes with representation. So that, to me, is going to be one of the next things going forward, Mike, in college. Are we going to get there? Are we going to get to unionized players, which Northwestern tried, and some others, I believe, have tried? Are we going to get to that wholly? Where that to me is, because I agree with you. The NCAA $600 for the EA Sports is not the hill to die on. Where is it going to be revenue sharing? Are we going to get past NIL? We have comments from Nick Saban we'll talk about a little bit later. Where is this going next? Is it revenue sharing? Is it a union amongst players? How will they be represented? It's going somewhere. We're not sure where, but yeah, this isn't the one to pound the gavel on and say, no, you've gone too far with a paltry $600 for each of us.
Yeah, I think you're right. Eventually it goes that way. But again, I always do look at it and try and remind myself, hey, from a player standpoint, these guys, asking them to come together and unionize, considering they're in a 4 to 5 year window. They're incredibly, in transit players in this process that you're asking to go out here and fight the power. It was the same thing that came up during the pandemic when we were asking a lot of these guys to stand up and send a message and risk their limited window to go out for the greater good. That's tough to ask. So it's going to happen, but it's going to happen because the courts, these people that are decision makers far outside their purview, are going to make it so and force it to be that way. But yeah, like at the end of the day, to go back to Emerson's original question though, for the vast majority of guys, like we don't know at this point what the average like NIL payout per player is on even, let's say, a Power 5 football team. But if you were to do it at percentages, yeah, a couple of the top guys are probably going to feel like they're not getting their due. But that's the same in the NFL. Quarterbacks making $30, $40 million a year are all getting the same style of payout from Madden that the other guys are. When I was getting into trying out for the NFL, it was like 10 grand a year. The most recent stuff I've heard is about 20 grand a year for everybody. So that's going to mean different things to different guys. But for the vast majority of dudes in college football, if you say, hey, we can pocket you $600 and either pay for rent or a next couple of months of drinks on a college campus, and then we'll get you this game that you're in, I think most guys are going to take it, and I would have probably been one of the first ones to raise my hand and be like, hell yeah, let's do this.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where, as you mentioned, getting on the same page. I'll go further. My union, my players, guys, we are all together in the same union. When I was playing, the quarterbacks had what they called a quarterback club, where they were getting completely separate things from the rest of us because, they were the quarterbacks, and that's the position. So as I will continue to say, even amongst players with a union and representation, there was a group that wanted to separate themselves because they felt they could make better deals for just themselves, the quarterbacks, than, the lonely, occasional starting defensive lineman. So it's just not going to happen on the college level. And that I'll continue to keep saying, when does it and what gets these guys together?
Yeah, hell yeah. I mean, listen, at least in the NFL level, we can say the brass, the owners work together and are able to get stuff done. In college football, we've seen leadership can't even work together, let alone the players.
Yeah.
Basketball supernova Caitlin Clark continuing to drive the sport to new heights here. She did struggle last night. Looked human after all in Iowa's loss to Indiana. So the NCAA women's scoring leader, who's setting NIL merch records left and right, had just 24 points on 8 of 26 shootings. That's 3 of 16 from 3. She needs 75 points now to pass Pete Maravich for the all-time record. Next game, she's going to be playing Mad Gojo. Illinois Sunday, 1 o'clock Eastern time. When she is playing, it feels like appointment television, does it not? So where do you think she ranks among biggest names, and not just college sports right now, but sports in general?
She's certainly up there very high, and I feel like, Dad, and as we bring in our dear friend Jessica Smetana, who you guys can catch over on the Dan Le Batard show, in here to join us now. And we got a lot to get to with Jess, especially with very sassy baseball pants making the round through MLB spring training. I did want to touch on this because what's gone on with Caitlin Clark, as we've seen now, Jay Williams very publicly start to be the guy that I believe is running with a Stu Gotts take that Caitlin Clark can't actually be the GOAT because she hasn't won a championship yet. Jess, I don't know about you. I've almost been heartened to see this kind of like normal meathead sports talk radio device applied to women's basketball now as a sure sign that the sport really is crushing it right now if we're doing GOAT debates to this extent.
That is a fair point. I think it goes without saying, it is like the laziest take of all time, which is why we associate it with Stu Gotts. You just, this player's not great because they didn't win a championship. Doesn't take into account the fact that she's playing in her home state at a team that is not a women's basketball powerhouse and did take them to the NCAA final last year, not to mention all of the records she's broken along the way. But yeah, we're counting NCAA championship tournament rings and she doesn't have one, so she's not great. Sure. I think there's probably a large group of people that would say, yes, this is a sign that women's basketball has reached the mainstream because now we are getting these types of takes. I think there's probably also a fair amount of people that think, do we have to do this in women's sports? We already do it enough in men's sports. Can we have our coverage of our sports be a little bit better, a little bit more nuanced, a little less hot takey? But I think the answer is probably going to end you up somewhere in the middle where it's a little bit of this is good, but like we don't have to always do the hot takes for every single thing that happens.
Yeah, to hear the line come out that I don't think she's, one of the greatest. She's really, 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 really good. But do we go great? I mean, you kind of start to shake your head. And again, as Emerson said, struggled last night, 20 points in the first half against Indiana, but just 4 in the second half, 75 points away from Pete Maravich and the all-time record for Division I. So I guess where does it go, Jess, with her? We're talking about NIL and jersey sales and what she means. I guess if the sports have changed over time now with NIL and how you're out there publicly, where does she sit in your mind in this new era of college sports?
she's certainly one of the greatest of all times. I think that that type of conversation is always open for debate as it changes, but her college career is not over yet. I'm really interested to see how they do in the tournament this year. As you saw, if you watched the game last night against Indiana on Peacock, women's basketball right now is as competitive as it's ever been. There are, I think, will be around 8 Big Ten teams in the tournament this year. There's 9 teams from the ACC. It's super competitive. It's really hard. NC State also lost last night. It's going to be a really big challenge to get back to where Iowa was last year in the final. If they do it, it will be because of Caitlin Clark. It will be because she can put up these numbers and she can have her fingerprints on every single point in a game almost. So Indiana played a really tough and physical game last night. There's only a couple games left in the regular season before, all the conference tournaments and things start, and we get to figure out a little bit more what the seeding will be in the tournament. But yeah, I think it's impossible to have a conversation about, great college basketball players without including the person that now holds the record for the most points in NCAA women's basketball, which right now is Caitlin Clark, and it's going to be tough to beat that record.
I mean, and I think even outside of that, because you're right, Jess, these GOAT debates, it's interesting coming off all the JJ Redick first Kate conversation the other day about the way that we cover all these sports. And I think my general takeaway was there's kind of room for all of it. If this is an access point that brings a couple more people to watching Caitlin Clark or checking out an Iowa women's basketball game because of that, that's probably a net positive, even if we'd like things at time to tamper down a little bit. But she's broken contain. She's become a star, not just in the world of college basketball. And we know the last time I feel like we really had a star of this caliber in that sport was probably Zion Williamson at Duke on the men's side. Like, it doesn't feel like very often we get players that become a national headline like this from college basketball anymore. But we've seen in the last couple of years, especially, the women's game has been much more adept at producing those. I'm not sure if you have a theory as to why that's been the case versus what we've seen from the men's game that I don't feel like has nearly as many household names right now.
I think there's a lot of things to consider when we're talking about women's basketball and who does break contain and which players we give our attention to, because there have been stars in the women's game that haven't gotten the same level of attention as Caitlin Clark. And I don't say this to diminish like any of Caitlin's records that she's broken, anything she's done, because she's a phenomenal player and deserves this attention. But I think like over the last several years, you can look at a lot of players in women's basketball and wonder why they didn't receive the same level of fandom and stardom. I think of Aaliyah Boston last year, one of the most incredible players I've watched in college basketball, who was Rookie of the Year this year in the WNBA. It was phenomenal to watch, a really great player, a great interview. We had her on our podcast when I was doing my show with Kate Fagan last year, Off the Looking Glass. She's someone that is now doing studio analysis, and she's everywhere, but I don't really see the same level of, accolades. Like, she's not getting the same. I'm not trying to, put them against one another, obviously.
I mean, Jess, we can say the elephant in the room. There's a lot of white hoping that goes on with someone like Caitlin Clark. Yes. It does in a sport that's overwhelmingly led by black women seem to not platform them in the same way as their white counterparts at times.
Yeah, and this is something that we've talked about a lot on the Le Batard show, and Kate and I used to talk about a lot. It's the way that women's basketball seems to be marketed to a wider audience. It always favors women that are straight, women that are white. This is something that WNBA players have talked about for a long time. It's something that coaches have talked about for a long time. And it's a reality about the sport that I think people want to ignore. And I think people, when you try to have the conversation, think that you're trying to diminish someone's achievements. And Caitlin herself has handled all of these things really well. And I give her tremendous credit for it. But it is something that, you can't really look at, why hasn't there been a star like this? Well, I could tell you a few reasons. There have been really great players in women's basketball, and people don't want to pay attention sometimes.
It's very true.
She's the biggest star in women's basketball right now. South Carolina's the best team in basketball right now, trying to go undefeated, first time since UConn did in 2015, 2016 season. So we'll see how that plays out. To go from a serious topic to a not so serious one, just the Major League Baseball new uniforms came out, and basically they're see-through. So what does that mean for you?
Hell yeah, brother.
It's insane, right? Like these pictures that I'm seeing on social media, I don't even think you can put them on your show because they're so graphic, although I guess you're about to. So this picture you're showing is you could see the shirt tucked in through the see-through pants. I saw some photos on social media last night that were much more graphic, and I'm not entirely sure if they were photoshopped or not. The fact that you can believe that it's real, I do think still shows that there is a problem there. So I've seen the downplaying of like, we're making this like performance material and this is better for the players, and players are mad because they can't customize the pants now, but the pants do seem to be the issue. They are a problem. I don't know how they fix the pants. Maybe you reissue the pants. I don't know who's going to pay for that, but the players do not like the pants, and now we are seeing balls through pants.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, no, it's gone from balls and strikes to just balls in spring training so far for Major League Baseball, but maybe sex sells. We got the pitch clock coming up.
I don't know if the penis was photoshopped, but I saw a penis.
Yeah. No, dudes are letting it dangle for sure.
Thunder from down under.
Sweet Jesus. Well, everyone keep your head on a swivel during spring training. Jess, thank you as always for joining us, buddy. We very appreciate the insightful breakdown of the women's collegiate basketball landscape and balls.
All right, former Texas A&M quarterback Johnny Manziel, he certainly told some wild stories, right, concerning his time in college football. There's the autograph scandal. There's the using the urine from a backup quarterback to pass all of his drug tests in college. Guy was massive in college football. He was the face of it, really, at one point. So imagine him playing these days and able to, capitalize on NIL. Well, on Shannon Sharp's Club Shay Shay podcast, he may have let everyone in on what he could have made had he played longer for the Aggies.
My dad went and had a meeting with Kevin Sutton and pretty much went to him man to man and was like, we'll take $3 million and we'll stay for the next 2 years. And my dad says this is true as today as he did when he told me. And I ain't mad at him about it for nothing. It's the way the business worked back then.
Right.
There was a bag man. There was a bag man at LSU. There was a bag man at Bama. There was a bag man at every school around the country if you were competing for a national title. It is what it was. And it was always that way until we're into the NIL portion of everything now, the way it should be.
GoJo, I think we had an idea of kind of what went down in college football before NIL rolled around, but to me it is kind of refreshing to hear somebody take us behind closed doors and really open up about it, though.
Yeah, he is a really interesting character in college football history because of that, Emerson. Because you're right, this is stuff that we've all heard about. We've heard about from guys, off the record, behind the scenes, but very rarely as candidly as Johnny seems to talk about all this stuff. Dad, in large part because we've seen what's gone on in his life. We saw what happened when he got to the NFL. Part of this interview with Shannon was him being very honest about, hey, these are all the ways I messed up this opportunity. These are all the people that were trying to help me do better with this, and I couldn't. And so because he's lived his mistakes so publicly, he has very few qualms about sharing this stuff that most people would rather keep private, because I think for a lot of people, they think, oh, what a stain on my reputation this would be if people knew the things that were going on, if people knew the underlying business of college football at the time. And Johnny's just like, no, here it is. This is it offered up on a silver platter. And I think it's really productive because there's so many people in and around the NCAA that want to act like this was never the case, as now we moved into this world of legalized NIL and all of this happening in front of us.
Yeah, we've heard, smatterings of stories from other players over the years, but Johnny really broke it down. The documentary on Johnny and what he did is there a guy that took advantage and lived college experience like all of us would have loved to live the college experience? I mean, that dude took advantage of every perk that came his way, and more power to him for it. It was breaking the rules of the NCAA, but he was in a line of others that had done it as well. Hell, he even said, when Reggie Bush got his Heisman taken away, he's like, I did way worse stuff than Reggie Bush, and I still have my Heisman. I mean, and all the bagman stuff, we all knew that happened. Hell, I got offered money from another school when I was getting recruited. I mean, it happens, and everybody just wants to make kind of that dirty little secret of stuff that maybe didn't really happen. But Johnny's out here spouting, all this stuff happened, and I'm not afraid to talk about it.
Wait, I don't think I knew that. So wait, back in 1981 when you were getting recruited, you got offered money by a bagman?
$1,000 a month.
Oh.
$1,000 a month. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. In 1981, that's a ton of money.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. It would have been great drinking money for sure. Yeah. Yeah. But I did. And listen, it definitely happened. I mean, he's not wrong. That stuff happened, and it happened at obviously major amounts. And I was considered, this is how ridiculous ratings are. I played linebacker in high school, and I was rated as the number one defensive lineman in the country. I never played D-line, yet they rated me number one. I mean, that's how ridiculous some of these ratings can be. But, it led to being heavily recruited and like I said, offered some money there. So that stuff is true. And Johnny, it's a shame with the pro career. He just didn't put enough into it and admits that he didn't. But, do I think he opened any eyes? No, not really. I think it's just cool to actually hear the stories. His dad going to Sumlin and talking about $3 million and talking openly about things that we kind of know went on in some shape or fashion in college sports.
$1,000 a month in 1981 is $3,554.41 in 2024.
How about that?
Yeah.
How about that?
Dude, you could have been loaded, bro.
Good work if you can get it back in the day there. But Dad, I think you mentioned it there. For a lot of people, the reason, and I remember at the time, now I was pretty young in this industry, and it was at that point fun to see someone that didn't feel like they had to be constricted by what we expect a star player, especially a star quarterback, to be. He lived loud. He was himself. You had the money sign celebration. He was really, really loud in a sport that usually asks you to be very quiet and buttoned up when you played the CEO position. And I think that's why a lot of people like myself and others, he was sort of the micro version of what the 2017 Eagles Super Bowl represented versus the Patriots dynasty, where, hey, you can do this with a little more flair. You can do this with a little bit more personality. But we also saw the toll for that on the other side for him. He talked with Shannon Sharp about LeBron James. And when he was in Cleveland, Johnny Manziel was playing for the Browns. LeBron was obviously there with the Cavaliers, and said LeBron tried to put an arm around him and he rejected it because he was so depressed with what was going on in the rest of his life because things had spiraled out of control. I thought this was really interesting. All right, we don't have that sound apparently.
Take our word
Let's
for it.
stray. Yeah, but he talked about it. He said LeBron used to invite him over to play cards, to do a lot of stuff with them, to try and basically give him the game early on, to be a big brother to a guy that was in his hometown trying to do this. And Dad, it's a good reminder now that this is what Johnny went through very privately back then because he had to.
Yeah.
And now that we've got this all going on publicly, I think the spin forward for the modern athlete is we've got guys now that are coming into this money much more legally. We've got guys now that are going to have similar trappings and problems that can come along with that. I'm not here to boogeyman it. I want these guys to get the money. We let 18-year-old adults do plenty of things in this country. We should let these guys be able to go out here and make money, especially off their name, image, and likeness. We can get to the rest of that stuff. But it's also a reminder, we've got to do the teaching on the other side. These higher learning institutions, if they want to back up that name, owe it to these guys who are on their campus giving their bodies for the cause here that makes everyone else all this money and gets everyone else upping enrollment rates and all this ancillary benefit for the school. They've got to help prepare them for what comes along with this stuff, because if not, some of the feelings that crept in for Johnny Manziel when all this fame and all of this money starts to do and run its course in the way that it can for some guys and certain personality types, this can be what comes on the other side, where you get guys that end up incredibly depressed and going through these trials and tribulations because it was just too much too soon.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we're in the area that's a whole nother discussion about the mental health side of athletes who have been great athletes that go on to college and then for whatever reason, it's not there for them anymore. They're in a different situation and there's no help for them because we're only concerned about you on what you do on the football field. It's so much better now for the players because they don't have to do things in the shadows, right? You don't have to worry about, okay, I'm doing this is wrong, am I going to get caught? Now it's legal. So at least there's that. There's from the mental side of it, this is legal. I don't have to hide in doing this. I can do it out in the open. But look, we've also said this for years that there should be courses, especially in the summer, I always thought, for athletes on how to manage things, how to manage money, and how to do the simple things you're going to need in life when you don't make it to the pros of your sport, which most percentage of people don't. But as we've seen, colleges, for the most part, get you in class to make sure, you got your grades, to make sure we have our, grade point average up there, and get you on the field to get the most out of you from there. And other than that, everything else is gravy. And it's gone even worse than that now. Now schools even think, well, hell, you're getting money, so you're fine. Where maybe there is more help that's even needed. But I don't know if it's going to be there for these players because now they can get outside help with everything. So the school's probably like, you can do this all on your own legally, so you go ahead and do it.
Yeah, it's a great point that everyone is trying to navigate this space at the same time very differently. Coaches also had a lot of these changes put in their lap and said, make sense of this. And we've seen it's been a different experience for everyone. So coming up next, let's visit with a current NCAA football coach at the D1 level and talk about navigating these changes with Kenny Dillingham next.
right, so college football has certainly entered a very different era from where the sport was really just a few years ago, and the changes have been uncomfortable out there for a number of coaches. Let's take Adam Schefter's tweet here, for example. A trend that has emerged this winter: many college coaches are tired of the transfer portal, the NIL money, and the new NCAA world and prefer to work in the NFL. Many college coaches already have left. Many more want to. Of course, Schefter doesn't speak for Arizona State head coach Kenny Dillingham, who doesn't want to hear your complaints. Here he is during a radio appearance on Wednesday when he was asked about the trend of head coaches leaving those jobs due to issues created by things such as NIL.
I mean, at the end of the day, I joke around, but you know how many people want my job? Like, you know how many people want my assistant coaches' jobs and my analyst jobs and the QB and the GA's jobs? So don't complain about what we do. You're blessed. There's a lot of negative of it, yes. But you know how many people want to be a college football coach? I literally spent 9 years of my life doing anything to become a coffee boy. So don't give me the, oh, it's hard to be a college coach right now. Yeah, it's hard. Then quit.
That's fantastic.
Like, that's how I look at it.
All right, the guys are standing by with the man of the hour right now. Take it away, boys.
100%
Yeah, so
agree.
we're very lucky to be joined by Kenny Dillingham, the head coach of the Arizona State Sun Devils, joining us now. And Coach, listen, I know it's been a couple of days since those comments started to make the rounds, and I know for you, you're going through this like a lot of other coaches right now. You've seen, I'm sure, what a lot of your brothers in the coaching industry are going through. So what was the point you were kind of trying to get across in all of this? What is your kind of view on this right now?
Yeah, my point was, regardless of how the obstacles that are now in college football, which there are a bunch of them, and people are trying to fix them and change it and make it better. I'm not arguing that. What I'm arguing is if you wake up every day and you're a college football coach, whether you're a position coach, analyst, GA, and you're not blessed to do what you do, we're cheating you're cheating the guys. And I think the majority of the college football coaches that still do it are making a decision to still coach because they love it. And that's the point I was trying to make is I love this. I love it. I'm on a local radio show. I'm talking about the passion I have for what I do every day. And yeah, is it hard? Yeah, is it difficult? Yeah, there are things that keep coming up to make it even more difficult. But at the end of the day, nobody cares. Nobody cares about your circumstance. So figure it out. Find a way. And that was what I was saying was, man, I'm blessed to be here. If they fired me today, they could have a coach tomorrow. And they could have a coach in 10 seconds. They posted on Twitter that had 5,000 replies. And we're blessed to do this, man. We're blessed to be able to impact these guys and be around a locker room, which when you're done playing sports, that's what people miss the most is being around a team and the camaraderie. And we get to do that for a living. That's a special profession we're in. Let's not take it for granted. And even though there are obstacles that we need to fix and there's people way smarter than me trying to, let's not take what we have for granted as a football coach.
Coach, I 1,000% agree with that. I mean, this is it's like rule changes in sports. They say, oh, you can't do this. Well, you know what? Players adapt to rule changes, and coaches need to adapt to the way the landscape of college football is now. And those, it's adapt or die. There's no sense in complaining about it when it's not going to change. How do you use it to your advantage? And for someone like you, you're 33 years old and a head coach at Arizona State is really damn impressive. But you've been at Memphis, you've been at Auburn, you've been at Florida State, you've been coaching before the NIL and the transfer portal and now in it. What has been, because as you mentioned, can be a little more difficult. What have been some of the bigger hurdles that have come up since this has all started?
Yeah, I mean, just the fact that there's not many regulations around it from a coaching perspective make it more difficult. From a player perspective, make it more difficult because, it's all basically verbal conversations right now of what other people make and what this, and there's no true deals being set for these guys when they get somewhere. So I'm always going to be an advocate of protecting the player. That's just how I operate. So I think more rules in place to protect the players before they get to a school. But that also opens up bigger cans of worms. That's why I don't have solutions. But I just have problems in this space. I don't have the fixes, unfortunately. But it makes it difficult you got to weed through. It used to be somebody would promise you playing time, someone would promise you that you're better than this guy. Now it's all these other types of promises that can truly affect people's lives. And sometimes they come true and sometimes they don't. And that's what painful for me to see, is when those promises that affect people's lives don't come true, and they're making life-changing decisions off of it.
And listen, Jaden Rashada was a quarterback that was at the center of that before he wound up with you guys at Arizona State. In general, Coach, how do you focus on then your message in the midst of all this, with things being promised and all of what you just described? How do you approach dealing with players with all of this in the purview?
I think honesty. Like, we're an undersell, over-deliver program, and we're going to be brutally honest. And that's I'm young and I'm fun and we do fun things and I have a lot of energy. Great. At the end of the day, our program is built off honesty. Like, I'm going to be brutally honest with these guys when I meet with them. If somebody wants me to come in and tell them how good they are, that's not what they're going to hear. They're going to hear the truth. And I think when you're honest with people, you earn their respect. And that's just what I believe in. So I think through all of this maze of college football right now, which I agree with, there needs to be try to help it, right? But not necessarily for the coaches, for the players. I think the side right now is everybody's defending the coaches side of it. It's just as much the same issue the coaches want fixed, the same issues that are actually negatively affecting the players in terms of how the rules work in some ways. So I want the players to be in the best position for them when they embark in their college career and they know what they're about to get into, not hope they know what they're about to get into, which right now it's just a hope that these things come true.
And you're right. Sometimes players don't want to hear the truth, but it's the best thing for them to sometimes hear the truth, even if it's not the good there. I've asked many other college head coaches this just because of how it changes for you. When you go sit in a recruit's living room and talk to him and his parents, you sell the school and why you want to come play there and, be your coach. And now it almost seems like the first question you have to answer is how much, through the NIL. So how I'm curious as how you navigate that, to other coaches that I've talked to, navigate that question with recruits.
Yeah, to me, that's I don't bring that up unless they bring it up. And that's not a negative way. It's just not everybody is that the focus. Some people, that's the focus. Some people, that's third or fourth down the list. And I'm not going to jump to conclusions about somebody in terms of where $40,000 and how much that can affect their life. So I let kind of people bring that conversation to me, and then I just explain the guys on our team and how it works with them. Because you can't actually negotiate deals. You can't do those things. You can just inform people of what your players make on your team. So I kind of let that question come up naturally. Or if I feel that they don't know how to ask it, I'll bring it up. But I don't just jump to conclusions on that, because there are some people who get, if you come out with that, then that's your number one pitch for why you should come to their school. And some people still want to go to a place with education and the ability to play. And if your number one pitch is, I'm going to pay you, or my players make $80,000 more than you, then maybe that's a turnoff to that kid. So I think it's different with every kid, I would say.
Certainly that conversation on the front end with players is something, like you said, that's changed a lot recently. One of the other things that we always hear about as one of the difficulties coaches discuss is the idea of having to re-recruit your own players every year, what the option of the transfer portal presents for a lot of guys. So what does that entail in practice that you've seen so far since you've been on the job as the head coach at ASU? This idea of, all right, I've got to constantly be managing the relationships with these guys on my team that may be looking at the exit.
Yeah, well, I preface this entire conversation with, I've been doing this 1 year and we won 3 games last year. So do not, by any way, shape, or form, take this as the solution or the answer or the right way. I want to make that perfectly clear. But relationships and honesty. At the end of the day, kids are going to reach, everybody says there's a new generation of kid, right? I'm part of it. At the end of the day, people want to please people. That is human nature. I don't want to come on this show and you guys say, oh man, that was horrible. I'll never have that guy on again. Like, I want to please people. You guys have me on your show. I want you guys to feel, okay, I'm glad we had him. That's human nature. So I say that because at the end of the day, if you set high expectations, if the kids really know you care about them and that you want what's best for them, and you can make them better and show them that you're making them better, I think that's the recruitment of your staff. This whole the notion of the re-recruitment of your staff, I don't do much of that. If people want to be here, they want to be here. If people don't, they don't. Now, I think, like I said, I don't know the right answers to how that works. Some people re-recruit the staff. That may be or the players. That might be the better way to do it. I just truly want people on our team that want to be here, that are passionate about ASU, passionate about the people around them, and that want to be a part of it.
So as I mentioned, the other stops you're at, OC, with Memphis and Auburn, Florida State, Oregon. So now you're in, as we call it, the big chair at Arizona State for the first time. You had the 1 year, 3-9. You go, what are a couple of the biggest things you learned in becoming a first-time head coach and then going through the season that you did?
Yeah, I think one is everybody does it differently, and every job and every roster is different. Especially when taking over a place. So how you practice at one place, you may not be able to practice like that at another place, maybe based off of depth. And okay, because you can't practice like that, maybe you can't practice as physical here because you don't have the depth. How does that affect the schemes that you run? Because if you're not going to be able to run inside run for 15 minutes a day because you don't have the depth to keep people healthy, then can you be a ground and pound team, or you now have to open it up and spread it out because it's not going to do something to practice? So I learned a little bit being at different stops and different people, how they've done it. I try to take that, implement it here, but I really think I can do a better job taking actually what we have. How does our roster and our balance allow us to practice? And then how does that practice correlate to a game in terms of reps? And if we're running things that I've done in the past but it doesn't fit what we do, then that's not going to do something winning. So I would say when you're taking over a new place, really evaluate what you are and then affect that in the practice plan more than I probably did last year.
So with that as one of the big takeaways, you guys also have one of the big goals back on the table. You guys had the self-imposed bowl ban last season. I remember that came down right before the year, and you were really candid about how much that hurt the team and what that was as something that was a goal you guys had talked about. So now on the other side of that, how much does having that back as the carrot at the end of all this, the idea of bowl eligibility, matter going into this season for you guys?
Yeah, I think just for our guys, it's more the emotional toll on somebody than that. Like our program's vision is success, and we want to be successful. And what that is just being the very best at what you're doing all the time. It's that simple. There's not a championship. There's not a win. There's not a loss. It's just being successful every single day. So that moment was definitely more of a pull away and more of a, morality. It just kind of hurt the morale a little bit, which, I think we rallied in some capacity. But I think having that back is definitely something that our players are excited for. But hopefully they're not looking at it. Hopefully they're focused on getting better right now. Today, we're about to go out to workouts in 47 minutes. Our staff will be out there. We split up into 10 competition teams, and we compete for an hour in workouts, team by team, and we score points because life's about competition. Sports are about competition. There is a winner. There is a loser. That's how it works. And I want them to be able to respond to that and grow from that.
For the Big 12, their style of play, I know you're going to play the game, but does that matter to you in the way some of the other Big 12 teams play on how you may have to adjust at all?
100%. I think that's a great point. Changing league schemes are different. This league, the 3 high safety stuff that Iowa State and Matt Campbell brought in when he came, kind of took over the league for a little bit. And there's been some people, Cincinnati hired somebody from that staff to add that. TCU was that. They just went a different direction. But you really have to study the trends of the league schematically. That way it pairs up with your practice plans. More when you get into fall camp and when guys get into some summer off-season film watching on their own, you really have to educate them on what the differences in the schemes are. That way your plans coincide with that.
So scheme change there. Certainly, like you said, there's a lot to look forward to this year for Arizona State football. I know we're super excited to watch you guys. You guys are chomping at the bit, getting ready to go out there and work out now. And so before we keep going down to the future, I did want to turn eyes back on one thing. We're coming up to the NFL draft right now. You were at Oregon for a year when Bo Nix got there. And you got Bo at a really interesting juncture in his career for a lot of people publicly, the way that he was perceived, and then were a big part in now what he's become as not only a guy who was a great college player over the last couple of years, but someone who's now getting ready to be an NFL prospect. So from what you saw when you got to work under the hood with Bo, how do you think he's going to fare as an NFL quarterback?
I tell people all the time, you better draft him. You better draft him. The dude is a winner. He's competitive. He's a great human being. He's smart as all get out. If I would have gone back to Oregon, I don't even know if I would have I was run it, Bo. Like in the system we had, he knew it as well as any coach on our staff, if not better at times than me. He'd be like, but I got this look. Shouldn't we do this? And I'm like, yeah, it's a good answer too. So that guy is a can't miss human being, can't miss football mind. I never like to tell scouts or GMs about the physical. That's their job, is to measure how good they think he is physically. I think he's showtime. He can make every throw. I remember a story Coach Lanning one day told him, we just got to arm strength, gain your arm strength a little bit. The dude can throw the ball 65 yards. Coach was just challenging him on something. And the next day of practice, on the middle of a Tuesday, when we're an individual, he's on his knees, launching the ball 50 yards, trying to improve on it. It's just, that's who Bo is he's going to take every challenge you give him personal. If you say he can't do this, okay, that's a personal vendetta that I can. If you say somebody else is better than me at this, I'm going to find a way to bridge that gap. And when you have somebody who's a great person, super intelligent, comes from a great family, football, faith, family, he is the definition of it. And then you combine his skill set, and he's faster and more athletic than people think. Draft him. That's what I would say.
An incredible endorsement there that I hope people listen to from somebody who knows it incredibly, incredibly well. Coach, we appreciate the time this morning. Best of luck this season. Best of luck with workouts today. We know it's a 5 minutes in front of your face kind of sport, so go give them hell at the workout this morning, and hopefully we'll get to talk to you again soon here down the road.
Sounds good. I appreciate y'all having me. Have a great day.
Thanks, Coach.
There we go. Kenny Dillingham, kind enough to join as the head coach of the Arizona State Sun Devils. And, Dad, I think it's interesting with Kenny. I was thinking about this as we were asking him these questions in the interview. Like, when it comes to all the changes in the sport, as far as being a head coach, he doesn't know any different. He doesn't know anything different than having to go out and fundraise for NIL or having to deal with players who have the portal as an option or who have NIL as an option here. And I think it's going to be fascinating to watch what a generation of coaches like Kenny do with the opportunity where you don't know any different than what's going on. For him, for Dan Lanning, who took over in the midst of this, Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame, there's an incredible opportunity for people who are willing to embrace all of this change as their normal and go from there.
Yeah, listen, and I appreciate that very much, because you can complain about something, you can act on how hard it is, or you can try and manage it. And that's who's going to come through this, is those who find a way to manage where we are. And he's right that the thing that needs to happen is there needs to be more guardrails, just so everybody has a better idea of what you can and you can't do. But while that's going on, you manage as best you can given the circumstances. And for old guard coaches, it is a monster change to what they're used to, as opposed to guys, like Kenny Dillingham, who have, like you just said, this is their era. This is what they're used to. I'm not sure, and we're running out of time. I know, buy into what Shefty had said, our buddy from when we were together at ESPN, that more coaches are leaving. I mean, I still think the college coaches are always going to be around. There's always somebody that's going to want to do it. But do you think they're bailing more because of the rules now?
You know what? I do and I don't. Why don't we stick with this coming up next? Because I think there's a little bit of truth to what Adam Schefter said. Certainly we've seen it, but also part of this I think is overstated. And the reason why it gets overstated is what bothers me about this becoming a constant headline. back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr. here. Our thanks to ASU head coach Kenny Dillingham for joining us. And Dad, talking about the headline that came off, and Emerson set it up before the last segment, but it bears repeating, the tweet from Adam Schefter yesterday. So USC running back coach Keel McDonald had gone on and been hired by the Los Angeles Chargers. He was another one of the college coaches that had made the jump to the NFL this offseason, which is one of those things that does happen, I'm sure, for position coaches more often than we see in a given year. But people have become incredibly sensitive to it this year because we've seen a few high-profile names make the jump. We've seen guys like Jeff Hafley, who were head coaches at Power 5 schools like Boston College, make the jump to being position coaches in the NFL. And Adam Schefter became the latest in a group of people to tweet about the trend that emerged this winter. College coaches tired of the transfer portal, the NIL money, and the new NCAA world, and prefer to work in the NFL. Many college coaches have already left. Many more want to. What I'd say about this, because you asked about how true I believe this statement to be, Dad, there's some truth that I think the NFL has always been more appealing for certain reasons than college football, right? Before it was this, it was just the general idea of having to go out on the road as much as you do to recruit. And what a time suck that is, having to worry about, are these guys going to class? Are they handling all the other business that comes with being a college football player versus an NFL player where you just go and coach ball with those guys in the NFL? So there's always been that appeal. Do I think some of this has expedited that? Absolutely. I said at the beginning of all this NIL change, some of these rule changes were going to make a certain section of the coaching population, and I figured it would be a little bit older and a little bit more accomplished, decide, hey, you know what? I've done enough. I've been around for enough. I don't need to deal with another round of change in the sport. I'm probably good in all this. Some people got a little shocked when you had younger guys like Hafley joining the cause and joining the fight in that. But, Dad, the problem I run into is the way it's framed usually ends up becoming deeply anti-player, where it's, all right, well, we got to take away from these guys. When the group that had less suddenly gets some, it feels like they've got everything. And that's sort of what's gone on with the players and all of the new rights they've gained here, where, yes, it hasn't been rolled out the best way. I think we can all admit that for coaches who didn't have any say in how this process went too. So there is empathy or sympathy that I have for coaches in these positions, but when it's made out to seem like, oh, we're losing these great men, how is this sport going to go on? When, as Kenny said, if a coach leaves, there's going to be someone else ready to step up and take that job because the money, power, and everything else that comes with these jobs are still incredibly appealing to a lot of people that don't have that NFL opportunity because there's only so many of those at that level and only so many people coaching in college that are actually qualified for them. So I think that part gets overstated a lot.
Yeah, I would like to see numbers associated with what Shefty's tweet was, quite honestly. Yeah. Because I think always the appeal for coaches want to eventually be head coaches somewhere, be it in college or get to the highest level, and that's the NFL. That's always been there, always. So coaches, when they get the opportunity to jump to the NFL, are going to take that. Even if they're a coordinator in college to maybe be a head coach, they'll take a position to be a position coach in the NFL because now they're in the NFL and they start that NFL clock going of being an assistant coach. So that's always been there. Now, to sit there and say that the current landscape of college has nothing to do with coaches going would be naive. There's no doubt that the pro style anyway was more conducive to a coach not having to worry about, like you said, recruiting and now NIL and all the things that come along with it. It was, I think, to me, always more appealing. But there are some coaches that just want to be college coaches. They're happy there. If they can get a head coaching job in college, they'll do it for the rest of their lives. And they'll turn down anything going to their pro sport. Probably one of the biggest ones, Mike Krzyzewski. How many times was he offered to be in the NBA and never wanted to? He just wanted to coach in college, and that's cool. But a lot of coaches, they want to go to the top league. So, but I agree to your point, it's just highlighted more because of the landscape of college football. So while I do think there is some truth to coaches wanting to maybe make that move sooner than they wanted to, I don't think this is all of a sudden, look at this thing going on in college coaching. Everybody wants to bail and go to the NFL. No, a lot of the people want to go to the NFL no matter what and understand they have to take maybe a lesser job in the NFL to, like, as I said, start their NFL clock to rise among the ranks there.
I guess the problem I have is it's just presented as this existential problem in a sport that's got actual existential problems. And those have nothing to do with what the players have done here. And I got to check my own biases here, right? I'm deeply pro-player when it comes to this stuff. And I'm always sensitive when it seems like people want to come back in and take what these guys have gotten and gained in ground where they don't have representation. College football is dictated to the players and not the other way around. They have very little voice. People say they have a voice now more than ever. It's true to an extent, but a lot of that's come from higher courts. It's not been because the players have been able to go out here and necessarily will change with their collective might. That's a lot harder than people make it out to be. And so I know I'm very sensitive to that stuff, but it just seems like this is another way to reframe NIL and the portal as this boogeyman that's destroying the sport while we watch major conference realignment, the playoff expansion, everything around the TV deals that governs the sport in college football right now as the real change agents in this. But then we go back and just try and scapegoat players and say, all right, well, you know what? We can take a little bit back from what they have to make everybody else feel good and make the sport feel. I get it. We've changed your thing. College football is a very important thing for a lot of people. And when your thing gets changed as much as it is, it feels scary. Change is scary for all of us, no matter what circumstance in life. I get all that stuff. But man, it's sometimes when you're going through that change, you got to just pause and understand that eventually you're going to create something of a new normal. And we'll figure out better ways. Hell, there's already change happening in college football right now. News that the early signing period in college football, remember they got 2 of them now, one in December, one of the normal ones that comes up at the start of the new year. They're going to move that one up now before the portal opens because we saw what a jumbled mess that had become when you got coaching staffs trying to juggle both at once. We're making these tweaks to the system to try and make it run better. We created the transfer portal windows already. We're only a few years into this, so we're going to get better at doing this stuff. And I want to just make sure that we don't go and make this rash decision to make the rest of us feel comfortable that once again is another thing that's dictated to players who have no control over that circumstances, fully acknowledging that coaches can largely be in that same boat at times.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things here is we're used to the NCAA moving at a glacier pace, right, on any kind of change. And now all of a sudden, you got NIL with players taking money anywhere they wanted, and you had a transfer portal. And all of a sudden, there was this massive change in a short period of time compared to what the NCAA is normally used to. And I just think it put a lot of people on their heels to the point where now we are making these comments of, boy, everybody wants to get out, where I don't believe that's the truth. I believe it's changed. I believe some don't want to do it anymore, but I still think for the most part, Kenny is right. There will always be, for one coach that doesn't want to coach in college, 5,000 will want to and start their coaching career. So it's that there's never going to be a shortage there. That's never going to be an issue.
No, and I think that's ultimately where I want to work at. And most of us who have beat the drum for players over the years have done so because you've got this easy comparison right here of we just kind of want you to treat the players and the coaches the way that you treat the coaches more often than not, right? We've always highlighted, hey, the coaches have the ability to pick up and go wherever they want for a better deal, to move in a way that affects the 100+ guys on a roster more so than any one player transferring can affect that coach in there. We want to see in situations like this, you give them some of that same agency right now. As we're talking about all of this like it's the doom and gloom. Like, hey, these coaches just left a bunch of players high and dry this late in the recruiting cycle as some of them are getting ready to start spring ball and no one bats an eye. But when a player leaves, all of a sudden he's committing some mortal sin against the franchise that he just left. So those are the inconsistencies that become maddening to those of us who put on the helmet before and now who try and guard their best interest when we get the opportunity.
Yeah, there's so much more to talk about here. Nick Saban is speaking up as well, talking about 2-year contracts for players, so you know they're going to be there. And my thought quickly on that is, as soon as a coach can't move for 2 years when he signs a contract, then we'll start talking about that for the players as well. So let's all look in the mirror there, coaches, before you start telling the players, oh, you better live up to that scholarship that we got you. Hey, maybe you want to live up to the contract the coach signed as well.
This, oh, by the way, is a good reminder that Nick Saban and most coaches, I think, would prefer a model that more closely mimics professional sport. If that's the thing that you think is greener grass, we've heard most of them back it up publicly saying, yeah, it'd be a lot easier for us if you just went ahead and did it.
So the Bucks haven't really been able to figure out since Doc Rivers took over. They're 3-7 during that 10-game stretch, and Giannis has no surviving changes throughout the franchise from top to bottom, although this year may take the cake when it comes to instability, and the Greek Freak sounds like he may be freaking out quite a bit. A lot of things in terms of what's going on, what's wrong, a lot of things, up and down, changes, as I said, game plan, structure, all of the BS. We can start from bleeping ownership, changed. Coach, changed. Coach, changed again. Star players, changed. From Chris Middleton being in and out like so much effing S. It's just up and down, up and down. So many things changing, man, but we got to stay together. I don't like to victimize myself. I don't like to feel bad about myself. That's not who I am. So those were his quotes to The Athletic there. Gentlemen, we talked a lot about the Bucks' ability to turn this thing around this week, but how much do you put on Giannis's shoulders, GoJo?
Well, I mean, he's got ample shoulders to be able to shoulder that load. So I feel pretty good about that, as I feel good about your dramatic reading of Giannis Antetokounmpo's quotes there. But yeah, let's run down the timeline for a second, Dad. When you look, this has been a year where there's been a lot of tumult in the Bucks organization. Back in April, the NBA Board of Governors approves Bucks' new ownership by the Haslam Sports Group. 2 weeks later, after an injury sidelined Giannis early in the playoffs, they get bounced by the Miami Heat in round one. They fire Mike Budenholzer after that. They hire Adrian Griffin a month later. At the end of September, they bring in Damian Lillard for the trade. Then Giannis, who had been non-committal over the summer about signing long-term signs. And now you've gone through a season where they've already fired Adrian Griffin. As he mentioned, Chris Middleton, who's an incredibly important player to this team and was on their championship outfit, been in and out of the lineup. Replacing Drew Holiday with Damian Lillard hasn't been perfect yet. Dame's also been a guy that missed games leading up to the All-Star break. So you understand that while we just look and say, well, you've got Giannis, well, you've got Dame, this should be easy and you should be able to win still, a lot of that changing ground underneath their feet makes it understandable that especially in the first half of the NBA season, things would go wrong. But now down the home stretch, and especially now that Doc Rivers has framed this the way he has, there's no excuses. And if you lose, you're going to get blasted. No. So they better get right and figure it out.
So that's the thing. These, and I also love when he goes through the whole timeline. Then says, "I don't like to victimize myself. I don't feel, I don't want to feel bad about myself. That's not who I am." Thanks for just listing then everything that says that's what you did. So it comes down to are they excuses or are they reasons? Are these reasons that you are where you are, or are these just excuses to say this is why we are where we are? And I think some are reasons, some are excuses. Changing at head coach, means changing of styles. They were horrible defensively. That's why, you make the one firing and you bring in Doc, and it hasn't been working since. But to me, one of the biggest things is you haven't had your group on the court, right? Those 10 games we're talking about, 3-7 going into the break, 7 of those games, you didn't have your 3, Dame and Middleton and Giannis together. So that's what I had said before the break, and I'll say now, because, Mike, you're right. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. Nobody cares what you've gone through. Nobody could care less about it. So deal with it. What you have, deal with it. And at the end, if you don't make it, will they be excuses you're making, or will they be reasons for why you didn't? And to me, the biggest thing right now is you have 20 some odd games to, once you can get Middleton back on the court, if you can get this lineup playing together for any amount of time, how well can they gel before you hit the postseason?
Dad, I think the difference between an excuse and a reason generally tends to be the source, right? Their reasons when they come from us, they sound like excuses when they come from the people that are actually going through it. That generally tends to be because all the things he mentioned, if we're coherently analyzing basketball, are reasons why if you're grading against the other great teams in the league, you would say, all right, there's some instability here versus continuity that other teams have that are doing really well right now. We've got to factor that into our analysis. But when you hear it from Doc Rivers, when you hear it from Giannis Antetokounmpo, that generally tends to be the time where it resonates differently because we just don't internalize it that way. We don't receive it that way as a public when it comes from the source, when it comes from the people involved in it, because then we just call it excuses and then we seem like these great people we expect to do great things. are trying to give themselves an escape hatch here when they're just saying the same things that most of the rest of us do. So I think that's a fine line with those two things, especially when you've got one of the guys that's in the conversation for the best player in the world. Because in this sport in particular, what do we always assume? Hey, if you're one of those guys, you're supposed to be able to bootstrap this entire thing. Even if that's always been somewhat unrealistic, that's how everyone perceives it. And so it makes things very interesting. Like going into tonight, Dad, we're going to make this game with the Milwaukee Bucks and the Minnesota Timberwolves our Cash It or Trash It segment presented by DraftKings. Stay tuned. You're going to hear more about DraftKings and all it has to offer throughout our shows. DraftKings, the crown is yours. You're going up against the number one team in the Western Conference tonight. The T-Wolves are a 4-point favorite at home against the Bucks. The Bucks really need this win, and you mentioned they have been 3-7 going into the All-Star break. The Minnesota Timberwolves have been 7-3 going into the All-Star break in their last games. And Dad, I will absolutely cash a Bucks win here, because what would be the funniest possible outcome? What would be the dumbest thing that could happen? And generally, when I bet, it tends to be, hey, think of the funniest possible outcome, because usually sports are pretty dumb and the dumb thing can happen. And the Bucks have been sitting around all All-Star break and hearing all the talking and hearing all the chatter. And you got a Minnesota team that's been riding high and rolling for most of the season, and they look really good. And this Milwaukee team is another one. They do have a core of guys with championship experience, so I would not be surprised. Milwaukee plus 160 as underdogs on the money line tonight. I'll take that one, because again, this is now going to be a home stretch where I do wonder, as certain guys get healthy, as lineups start to tilt more towards the rotations you'll have in the postseason, if the dumbest possible thing could happen, which is this Bucks team that we've been railing on for the last week, would go out and beat the 1 seed in the West.
So to me, I mean, I think I would cash it for Milwaukee as well. But, you know, you wonder again about Chris Middleton. You know, is he's listed as day-to-day. You know, been out since I think it was February 6th. Or February 8th. So to me, I'll start buying more into them when he comes back and can get healthy. But I do think going into the break, how they were playing, that they're going to come out and they're going to try and come out like a ball of fire. So I would cash it on Milwaukee tonight as well. I would agree with you there.
Yeah, and we'll see. Like, I think for a lot of these teams, we're going to be paying attention to what happens coming right off the break, knowing full well that if they lose, we'll probably get another great Doc Rivers quote about how everyone's coming back from Cancun now. We had the foot coming out of the parking lot and all those things. But, Dad, I do think at some point, like, while we talk about the difference between excuses and reasons, you know this as someone that was in tied locker rooms for a long time, sometimes there is something to be said about just not saying much. Like when you're one of the teams that's going through it and is in the fire a bit right now, with the opportunity that they have too in the Eastern Conference, with the 76ers being what they are currently, with the Cavs being a team that people are going to have trust issues with in the postseason because of what happened last year, and the Knicks as a team that, yeah, people want to believe in. Jalen Brunson and them have been an awesome story, but still also remains to be seen in that time of year. You've got a great opportunity. It might just be time for everybody to stop. And listen, I say this as a guy that used to be the quote guy, that used to be the guy that did well with the media, and Giannis has always been that. It might just be time to give people a lot less right now in the name of protecting what your team's trying to do.
I would agree with that. And quickly with Chris Middleton, I say when he can play and play healthy. In Minnesota, he didn't practice with the team. The ankle is still not fully healed, so certainly wouldn't expect to see him. It would just be a matter of how many more games does he miss, because you want that ankle to be healthy. The last thing in the world you want is for him to come back and tweak that thing again. So you do want it to be fully healthy. He has been out a while with that ankle, so that needs to be healthy if this team is going to do that. Will be a reason and not an excuse. If Middleton isn't healthy enough to play with this team, or tweaks it again, especially when the playoffs roll around. So they got to make sure he's right.
Yeah, well, Giannis and Drew Holiday, I feel like always got a lot of top billing. You watch the end of a lot of those games, and it was the ball in Chris Middleton's hands and what he can do, creating for himself especially, that ended up being so special for that team. Coming up next, as we get to the final home stretch of this show for the week, we got to talk about an injustice. One of my favorite fast food franchises has been holding out on us here in America for years, and it finally comes to an end. We right this egregious wrong next on GoJo and Golic. right, guys, time to finish off the show and the week the way we always do with this, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to send you into the rest of your day. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us, leave us that 5-star rating, and check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on DraftKings Network, DraftKingsNetwork.com, our YouTube channel, and all the great streaming platforms we're on. Again, you can still catch the best of GoJo and Golic from noon to 1 p.m. Eastern on any radio station that carries VEASAN, our great friends over at the Vegas Stats and Info Network. If you missed any of it live, though, or our great guest, shout out to our friend Jessica Smetana from the Dan Levitard Show, and Kenny Dillingham, the head football coach at Arizona State, for joining us today. You can catch both of those interviews wherever you get your podcasts or available right here on the YouTube channel as soon as we get done with this show. But guys, let's get to this, that, and the third. I'm ticked off. So we got the announcement the other day that KFC is getting ready to introduce nationwide the Chizza. It's a chicken parm-related pizza. It's a fried chicken pizza, essentially, that they're going to introduce here nationwide. And when you first see the headline, you're like, hell yeah, chicken pizza. This is awesome. Using chicken to make other foods, always cool. It's been a great formula for KFC for a while now. Then you read the subtext that, Dad, this first got introduced in the Philippines back in 2015. Yeah. It has been since spread to places like Germany, Mexico, and I saw Italy. They gave this to Italians before they fed it to us. So I just want to know what we did to KFC to deserve you to hold out on us like this. I don't know, Dad. I don't know if you feel the same way as me, but I took this as a personal slight.
Well, I'd like to know the reason, right? I mean, it's one thing to introduce it somewhere else, just kind of quickly do a test somewhere else. But as you mentioned, it's been out since 15 and in those different places. So why so long before it came here? Who wouldn't love a piece of breaded chicken with mozzarella or with marinara sauce, mozzarella, pepperoni, sausage, whatever? I mean, who wouldn't want to try that? I mean, so I don't know why it took so long. We need them to answer this question of why. It looks incredible. It's something we all would try. So why did it take, we're going on what now, 8th and 9th year of it actually being out and finally being able to get to our mouths here in America? Why?
It's not.
I will say, and I want to correct this from a journalistic integrity standpoint. Apparently, Italy was not one of the countries it was offered in. I misread that. It's India, Thailand, Korea, Taiwan, Spain, Germany, Mexico, and other countries. So it could have been Italy, but they're in the and other countries thing. I'm going to wait and find out more on that. But regardless, Emerson, that's a lot of countries that aren't the United States eating this.
Yeah, that's true. And I could see that dropping in Italy and then being like, no. Like sticking their noses up at it. Like, I'm not touching that.
Yeah.
But guys, this is the trend that we see with a lot of fast food joints where you go overseas and all of a sudden you've got cooler menu items. Hell, look at the candy stand in almost any foreign country and you're going to get Kit Kat flavors and all these different candy varieties that you'll never see over here in the States. So I do feel like in general, we're getting punked by companies that have made a lot of their bread and butter out here. And I don't understand why. So
yes,
I don't know what we did to deserve this.
We in America need to be used as the guinea pigs more. Like we like that when it comes to food.
We're a country full of fat asses. Like that's who we are at our core.
Yes.
And as one of those, I would love to help out with this cause. So you guys know where to find us. KFC, everyone else here, do the right thing. Let us help you taste test your way through this. Emerson, let's get to a man who I'd imagine has not eaten as many Chizzas as I have. And it's like Glenn Powell getting a chance to actually pull a Ted Lasso and bring to life a commercial character and now bring it to the silver screen.
Yeah, that's right. He's going to star in a show as Eli Manning's alter ego here. So it's based on that episode on ESPN Plus, Eli's Places. Remember, the Giants quarterback, former Giants quarterback, goes undercover as a walk-on prospect named Chad Powers at Penn State. So here we go. The show's logline reads, when bad behavior nukes hotshot quarterback Russ Holiday's college career, he disguises himself and walks onto a struggling Southern football team as the talented Chad Powers. I'm going to watch it. I will. Absolutely. He's a good-looking dude. Yeah.
Glenn Powell is red hot right now, Dad. To borrow the line from Zoolander, he could sell ketchup popsicles to a woman wearing white gloves at this point right now. That's just kind of where we're at with Glenn Powell. But I like this as a fit. It was a funny bit. I remember, and Eli Manning even said that became way more popular than he ever expected. He was getting catcalled in the street about the Chad Powers thing. And so Glenn Powell with a mustache, I'm sure there's a lot of people that would sign up for that visual alone out there. He's a guy that does have some football experience from that beach scene in Top Gun. So all that mixed together feels like this has a chance. It's not going to probably do what Ted Lasso did, but at the very least, it seems like it's a fun side quest for a guy that most of Hollywood seems to like right now.
I think it'll be a fun thing to watch. I did dig the Eli Manning thing. That was very, very cool how they did that. So we'll this obviously a longer version of that. I'll be interested to see how this plays out. I'll watch it.
Glenn Powell had previously played a college athlete as a baseball player in Richard Linklater's Everybody Wants Some. So, it'll be... doing sports shows is always kind of a difficult task because a lot of it, especially if you want to include actual in-game sports action, gets done so poorly that it makes most of us that work around it laugh. A lot of it ends up being inside baseball stuff. Like, I'm sure the way our buddy Jason Fitz watches some movie that's about a musician making their way through, you tend to watch for the stuff you know. I think that's why so many football fans ended up laughing their asses off through something like Draft Day, because what's presented there is so ridiculous in comparison to this real thing that we actually know and go through.
Well, I mean, think if you're an actor who was never really an athlete and you're asked to play an athletic role, just on how daunting that would be, because the last thing you would want to do is go out on a field of play to kind of supposed to show that you're this athlete in this sport in this movie and it not look realistic. That would be a horrible thing.
Is Sydney Sweeney going to be in it?
Speaking of TBD on that one. Okay. I'm sure a lot of people also hoping there. Eli Manning, by the way, had a little chirp for Glenn Powell. He tweeted, "I hope Glenn's working on his QB skills. I saw him throw a football in Maverick, and he's got some work to do." To which Glenn Powell responded, "I saved America, and you're nitpicking me about the long ball. Talk to me when you win a championship lathered in coconut oil." I don't know if there's anyone on earth that wants to see Eli Manning lathered up in coconut oil, but if we can find that one sicko, we'll try and make that content happen for you. Emerson, let's get to the third and finish off with the sickoest content of the day. Gigantic snakes, and we're not talking about the Major League Baseball see-through pants.
Hey, listen, man, you took it there. Not me, but I was thinking it. Yeah, there's this giant anaconda. This thing, a team of scientists has discovered a new species of green anaconda in the Amazon rainforest. So there's been this video recorded. We see it. For watching the podcast on YouTube right now, you see this thing. It's 26 feet long. There's this scientist, this professor, who's just swimming alongside it. What is this man doing?
He's asking to die, Dad. I kept watching this video and expecting the snake to eventually turn and end his time on this earth.
I don't understand. That snake is so big, and this dude swimming by the snake. That snake makes one turn toward him, and it's over. You're in that snake's world, and you're done. Is there start to name the scariest places? And I don't have all the info, but the Amazon rainforest, the amount of things that could in a possibility, great possibility, kill you. I think, is it more than Australia? I mean, we always talk about Australia and the amount of things that can kill you. I find it hard to believe there's anything more than the Amazon rainforest of things that could kill you. And things we don't even know about yet there.
Australia, the Amazon rainforest, and I would say the bottom of the ocean, probably the three places that would be on the medal stand for that. I think we need to know more about Freek Vonk, the professor that's in charge of all this, who apparently is a Dutch biologist who specializes in snake venom, almost lost his arm due to a shark bite in the Caribbean reef, and has housed several parasites in his body, so saith the Wikipedia page. Sounds like new Steve Irwin just dropped, and we need to see more about this guy here. If you want to see and hear more about this show, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review it. Leave us a 5-star rating, and check us out live here 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you Monday.